Antonio, you could start. Antonio Martinez is from Shift. He's one of our partners from Shift, and he is just joining on this panel of non-technical roles and how to brillar. I'm gonna just let him talk about himself, what he does, and then we'll just go from there.
Hey everyone, like she said, my name is Antonio Martinez. I'm the Great Lakes Operations Manager here at Shift. Yeah, I basically handle everything that has to do with operations in the Great Lakes area, in specific Illinois, Wisconsin, and Indiana, and Kentucky. How Kentucky fits into the Great Lakes, not sure, but that's what falls under my scope. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, wait, you said Great Lakes, and I'm like, Kentucky's not even.
It's further down, right?
It's
Yeah,
okay.
it is.
Not wrong. I was trying to count the states around.
Exactly.
Yeah,
No,
Lakes are up here. Kentucky's more down here, but you know what? We're not gonna judge it. Whatever. It worked
Mhm.
out, right? That's all that matters. Steph, please feel free to introduce yourself.
Of course. Hey everyone, I'm Stephanie Opari, they them pronouns. I work for Grinder. I'm the Equality Outreach Manager, and I work in the social justice arm of the company called Grinder for Equality. And what that works on is, you know, building a world that is safe, just, and inclusive for people of all sexual orientations and gender identities that are either using the app or are just in the community.
I love it. Thank you so much. Thank you both. We have definitely two different sides of the spectrum here in regards to what the industries are, but that's the importance of it, right? Because this is exactly what this conversation is about, right? Finding non-technical roles in these tech companies that you would probably have never thought of. So this is why we're here. This is what we're here to do. So we're just going to get right into it. So first question, we'll start with Antonio. How long have you been in your non-technical role?
yeah, I've been here at Shift for 2 years, um, but all in all, my career in operations um, has been a little bit over 10 years. So prior to this, I was at another startup, similar grocery delivery, servicing members and shoppers. So definitely got some time under my belt.
Interesting how you were in kind of the same industry beforehand.
Yep.
Would love to even like after Steph asked the question, would love to even know how you even got into this industry to begin with, especially now that you're consecutively doing it for two jobs in a row. So yeah,
Yeah.
Steph, yes. How long have you been in your non-technical role? Like you do a lot for Grinder as is. That whole title was crazy, and I love it. So please, yeah, let us know how long have you been in this role in general, and not in this role and in non-technical role.
Sure. So at Grinder, I've been with the company for I think about a year and a half coming up. And in terms of doing partnerships and advocacy work for the community, LGBTQ community, the Latinx community, I say I started at the age of 8 when I was able to read things that were on the wall. And I say this because my parents owned a bakery, and I remember someone from the state coming in and posting the OSHA Act, in the back rooms and talking about hazardous pay and talking about what workers' rights are. And, you know, I would talk to the people that worked at my parents' bakery, and I was like, hey, how much do you get paid? Because this sign in English says this is how much you're supposed to get paid. And that, I think my parents didn't talk to me for a good 2, 3 years. Um, but it just kind of sparked this thing in me that, hey, we have information out there and we should all know about it. And we need to be able to create that in an accessible way. And I've just carried that along with me in every role that I've been.
Not you exposing your parents. That is
Oh,
what? That is
well, things
awesome. No,
changed
that's
after
good.
that. Things clearly
Yeah.
changed after that. And you know what? It made them realize that how they were treated before as immigrants isn't supposed to be replicated now just because they own a business. And that's also
Very
something that we'll talk a little bit later as we go along in the questions, but it's one of the key factors that I think about when creating sustainable ways to advocate for the people that we're trying to bring into non-tech roles, tech roles, and just in, bringing folks back to the table because that table was always ours, right? So bringing them back, it talks about not replicating these behaviors.
Who else
Love
has
that.
goosebumps right now? I have goosebumps, and it's only been like 2 minutes into the conversation.
Yep.
That was a fire answer, and I'm here for it. Okay, yeah. So we'll start again with Steph. Obviously, you kind of just touched on how you even got started in your career and your stance overall. So can you explain a little bit more on how you got into tech, or even like the tech side of your career, like how you got into it to begin with?
Sure. So Grinder is the first tech space that I am in, and I really believe that that was a community effort. I had about six different people forward me the role and say, "This is where you're supposed to be. Everything about you says that you're able to do this, and you deserve to be there." And I looked at it, and I really didn't believe that this role even existed. I was like, somebody's lying to me. It was around April as well, so I thought it was an April Fool's thing. Um, and when I spoke to one of, I call them like my mother in DC, and they were like, this is what you've been waiting for. And in many ways, that's true. I had already been doing the Hispanic partnership, Latinx partnership outreach for one of the White House COVID vaccination campaigns, and I had been spreading, messages about public health in vaccinations throughout the United States. And I was like, it's great that I'm able to do this for the Latinx community. I would love to be able to do this all over the world for the queer community as well, in terms of whatever that might be: education, know your rights, campaigning. And this opportunity presented itself, and I went for it. And I'm very grateful that the recruiters at Grindr were amazing in just, letting me know that, yeah, I have the skills for this, and let's try doing an interview process. And I feel like a lot of those things have to do with the fact that folks are rooted in community to be able to push me here.
I love that. It's so interesting. I just did another panel with Mario, who is in the chat, and Mario and Elisa Levette, and I'm I'm really glad to hear that I'm seeing folks in our community finding their true like positions that fit them. And we just had this conversation of being the jack of all trades, of being raised to do multiple things and not focusing on one thing. But you seem very focused on what you've always wanted to do since the age of 8. So I'm really, really happy for you that you're able to find something that really suits you, because not a lot of people can say it. But I'm really inspired because the last conversation we had two other folks that are saying, yeah, like they found their positions for them too. And it's very inspiring that the rest of us, not even just the Latina community, but just the folks of color in general, do have these opportunities to really make our own things happen. So, sorry, just a side note, I really appreciate your answer. So, I'm just really excited about it. So, Antonio, same question. Obviously, like reverting back to like what I was initially going to ask, how did you get into this industry, this niche industry, and now you're at your second job doing the same in the same industry as well? So, yeah, let us know.
Yeah, prior to getting into the whole tech space operations and startup industry, all that, um, I was in a very old industry, trucking, right? It's something that it's not. My father was a trucker, has developed his career into that business. I always thought I would end up there, right? Either you know becoming a broker or something like that, and everything that I learned from him, like my father was a firm believer. He would tell me, en esta vida pagas por lo que no sabes. You pay in this world, you pay for what you don't know. So he always encouraged me to like learn everything that I could and do as much as I could on my own, right? And so, especially coming from a small town in Mexico, like the resources were slim, so we had to kind of be very on our feet, think things through, troubleshoot a lot of our issues, and solve for ourselves. So when I got into the trucking industry, I kind of just dove into everything that involved private contractors, 1099 workers, um, everything, the cost to transport. I got into how much diesel was and gas and what affects those prices and stuff like that. And more importantly, how to work with independent contractors. So when a startup came before this, they're like, "Hey, we're looking for somebody that," and it just happened to spark a communication. Like I asked a question, reached out to somebody. Was curious what the position was. I didn't even know if I was gonna fit in. I asked, like, "What are you looking for?" It's like, "Well, we're looking for this." And I'm like, "Well, I come from this background. This is what I understand from private contractors." And they're like, "Great. we're going to bring you on as just somebody to help us understand and navigate, these legal requirements for, gig work. It was all just starting before, right at the time of the precipice of Uber and all that. Everything was just starting. So when I joined on there, kind of like the words my father always told me is like, you have to learn, and what you don't know, you have to get out there and not be afraid to like learn it and really master it. So I first started off with advising on private contractors, and then it was like, do you want to test, the app we're launching? Do you want to, better our hiring practices? How do you want to manage, a fleet of shoppers and, employees? And it just kind of started growing from there. And that's kind of like how I ended up so deep into it, right? Every opportunity that I was given, I was told like, hey, I don't know, but I'm going to learn it and really dive into it. And like, that's how I kind of like stood, stood up in this role for so long.
I love that. I feel like I feel like you hit a certain age. I just read somewhere recently, like what you learn in your 30s is like you just learn how to wing it, and you're just on the fly, and you just make it what you have to make it, and you learn it and on a whim and do what you have to do. So I'm really glad that you said that. It's really refreshing to hear. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I never would have thought that you would have started in trucking. That's something totally unexpected, but I love it and I'm here for it. What advice would you give for those who have no experience in tech to join the tech industry? Yeah, I think for non-technical roles, it's not as easy. Um, so yeah, I have stuff to say. Even myself being non-technical, I'm just gonna share my own thing. I got in by sheer luck. I worked at a law firm, and then I got laid off during the pandemic, and then got a recruiter reaching out to me from this other tech industry or this tech organization that I used to work with. But that was just my luck, and then through that company, I found Tequeria, and then I got my job at Tequeria through Tequeria. So there it is. So I just want to share my story because as a non-technical role, it's very interesting how you can come about these things. So I'm going to pass the mic to Antonio. Like, tell us, like, any advice for those in non-technical roles trying to get into the industry?
Yeah, I think the biggest advice I would give is like, don't let like your perception of what your role is, like, oh, it's a non-technical role, it may not fit in a tech company, right? Like, that's not true. All right, technology could get you so far, but you need the people. You need to have that confidence and to understand that people are the driving, whether it's results that a company is looking for or culture that a company is looking for. It's going to take, a diverse background of experience and people to really get it down. So I think it's a lot of mental stuff, is like, get it over your head. Like, if you're working at a bank, you could work at a startup, you could work at a tech company, because the skills you have there is going to be applicable anywhere you go, right? People are people, managing people are going to be the same. So it's more get over the fear, and it's hard, right? It's not easy at all. Like, I'm one of those people that I'm my biggest critic, and definitely have imposter syndrome, like a lot of the Hispanic community tends to have, and definitely kind of get rid of that notion of your head that you may not be a good fit. I believe at the end of the day, it's not necessarily a tech role or non-tech role. I think it's more of, what you want it to be, if that makes sense.
I appreciate that answer. Yeah, I think imposter syndrome is such a big thing. I don't even think it's just in our community. I think in general, it's just such a big thing. And it does take time to get over that. But I think that's why, like, having a village and community, I know, Steph, you mentioned like having a community before too, like helping you out and getting you where you're at now, right? It's so important. So I think as long as you have, in my eyes, like I've realized if I have a stable village, I don't have imposter syndrome like I used to. Shout out to my executive director and my coworker. and Jolise, who let me be a riot and just who I am when, I'm not able to be like this. And Ashley, shout out to Ashley Harrington from Shipped, who always just lets me be and just cracks me up. And both of us are just having a great time and being our realest selves. So, anyways, a strong village definitely helps. But Steph, I'm
It
going to
does.
ask you the same question too. What advice would you give for those who have no experience in the tech industry to get into the industry?
For me, what I tell everyone, whether it's the tech industry or any industry that you're trying to break into, you cannot be afraid to connect to people. And I understand that like sometimes we're throwing direct messages in LinkedIn and other spaces, but check into what like the local professional chapter or network looks like in your area and just go. Even if you're not in that area yet, if you're not in that field, go. Because somebody there is also starting. Somebody there just got hired 2 weeks ago and they're also afraid to talk to people. Don't be afraid to talk to people. We are just humans, right? And that's where I also tell folks that once you get into these roles, like you can't shut the community off. You can't shut folks that are coming in, right? You have to continue having those conversations to bring people up. And Antonio, I love what you said about just being able to learn everything because I love the title, brillamos. We are here and we're shining and we've learned and we're still learning and we're still growing. We have to believe in our skills. We've
Hmm.
got this and we're here for many different reasons, right? And I understand that like on our CVs and our cover letters, we'll tell like our employers and recruiters all the things that we do, but we forget all the lessons that we've learned in between and the accomplishments that have led us to get to those positions, right? I think even in terms of like fundraising, right? Um, I learned fundraising by selling jello shots at a bar for a community event. And that went on to actually writing grants for a nonprofit, right? It's these baby steps that you take to learn who you are. So believe in the skills and believe in the path that you're building for yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think you kind of actually went into the next question, like believing in yourself. It's kind of like why are non-technical roles underrepresented in tech? And I have a feeling that has to do with even the last answer you gave of like not believing in yourself or not pushing for more. So I'm gonna let Steph answer this question first. I'll repeat it again. So why are non-technical roles underrepresented in tech?
Well, I think also is like we don't believe that these are actual roles, right? A lot of us have social media apps, dating apps, shopping apps, all these different apps on our phone. And this is where I like to quote my mom, where it's like, son las computadoras, son los robots that are there and they're, doing all these things for the phone. And I'm like, no, those are people. There are people behind these apps, their companies, their teams. And, when you grow up in environments when you don't know that, right? When you're just presented technology as a way to access things, perhaps, or something that you use for your homework, you really don't know what's behind all of the technology that exists out there. And that's where we have to continue showing up and telling folks, like, hey, you're able to be here too. We're even as the Latinx community underrepresented in tech, in general, just because we don't know that there are people there and our hint they're there too.
Yeah, that's a beautiful answer, and I don't even have anything to add on it because I completely agree with it. Antonio, I'm gonna pass the question or the torch over to you.
Yeah.
I can repeat it as well. So, why are non-technical roles underrepresented in tech?
Yeah. So I'm pretty spoiled right now being here at Ship just because like it is an emphasis. Our team, like you mentioned, actually is great. And like they emphasize the importance of all everybody's individual role and how it pertains to you know a ship as a whole. But I started a startup where before we didn't have anybody but engineers, right? And that startup is now successful and it's a great company and just went public. But there were some growing pains, and it was just an understanding is like, hey, your technology is only going to get you as far as it's limited, right? It's not going to get you to the home stretch and where you want it to go. So I was there when we didn't have a lot of like non-technical roles, and the need was clearly there, and you had to kind of build it out little by little. And they're underrepresented just because, kind of like what Steph said, you interact with these apps and you kind of, it works, right? But you don't really think about what makes it work, right? Like the people that are answering the phones for customer service, or the people that are, troubleshooting, you know, uh, an experience for a flow of an app. All that goes into it, and people don't realize like how many different, like at Shift, how many different diverse departments we have, right? That are not just in tech, right? Besides our engineering, our data science team, which is great. We have people that are, into the diversity inclusion. We have people like in operations that are making sure this technology is working and then implementing it to make sure we're being efficient and being using it to its maximum potential. And then again, people forget when they think about tech, they forget that there's a people aspect, there's people behind it. So I think once you start remembering, like, hey, we all have faces. There's Latinx people, there's people of color, there's people of diverse backgrounds from different countries working to make this app work. You kind of start to really dig into it. So, but until we start thinking about all that, it's underrepresented.
I completely agree. People need to be peopling, right? In order for these things to be successful. Like, and I don't understand why, people forget. Like, hey, like it's the most bizarre thing, right? Like, it's like, yo, y'all know you need actual gente to be doing these little things that you say are little, right? In order for your new startup or whatever, or
Mm,
marketing or events or operations to be like successful. So I just be getting so mad about it because I'm like, bro, why don't people do this? Like, where's the actual bigger aspect? Like, people should be understanding, like, yo, you need us. You need us actually more than we need you. Which is like so wild. So, anyways, so sorry. I just get I love my non-technical role. I can never see myself actually going into anything technical. But why do you suggest a non-technical role over a technical role? Um, Not because we're all three of us are biased on here, but let's start with Steph on this one. Why do you suggest a non-technical role over a technical position?
well, it's not about suggesting, right? Because I don't know everybody here, and I just say, like, coming out of the pandemic and seeing people again, a lot of folks assume that when I said I worked at Grinder, that I must have learned coding during these months, and being stuck at home. And for me, that wasn't the case. Like, while I encourage that we should have more Latinx folks in STEM positions, in tech positions, that wasn't for me. Not because I couldn't do it. I just knew that I wasn't going to enjoy it. And I think that's where a lot of self-awareness comes in, and knowing who you are and being confident in the work that you're doing. But even if you have a tech position and you want to have a non-tech position, um, also just thinking about who are you here for, what do you value, and how you are accomplishing personal and professional goals at the same time. If those things align for you, you already have the experience, unique skills. You have, your entire life of just different opportunities that you've had to bring into these roles, right? And those are going to be valued. So it just kind of depends on what it is that you want to do, and that's the important part right there.
Thank you for that answer. It made me now. I'm like, man, I kind of phrased that question a little bit more rough than anticipated. But the way you elaborated was really nice. So I'm gonna say, like, to Antonio, not why do you suggest a non-technical role, but what are the benefits of having a non-technical role over a technical role? Does that sound better? That probably should have been the way I phrased it.
I would definitely be biased, right? I love my
For sure.
role, and as I've been here, I've learned a lot of different parts of the tech role side, right? And I choose to be in this role just because it's very fulfilling, right? Like the work that I do is what interacting with a lot of different departments in the company, and it has an impact on the experience our customers have, and like when I see members and customers are having a great experience, it makes me feel great. It helps me build relationships with retailers, and again, when they mention us as like a big part of what they're doing, it feels great. And the best part is like, all right, you're interacting with shoppers or people that are trying to use this to make a living. To me, it's like, wow, I'm making an impact in a lot of different directions and in different areas.
Mhm.
And it's like a lot of the work that I'm doing is directly affecting that. So it's very fulfilling to me. And I think you don't always get that on the technical side, right? Because you're building an app or you're building, you know, a lot of, foundational systems, but you never get to see how those foundational systems impact or have a direct, impact on those. So that's kind of what I like the most.
Love that. Thank you so much, both of you, for your answers. It's already been half hour, which is wild. So I'm going to leave off with one fun fact question real quick. So, Antonio, what's your favorite cuisine slash dish?
So, you know, I again, growing up in Mexico, it's like I didn't have a lot of money, y'all. We had nothing growing up, and I loved it, right? Like every minute. But my favorite meal was coming home, like growing up, is like frijoles de la olla. It was like
Mm.
a pot of like, beans just stewing for hours and then getting it nice and hot with a little bit of queso fresco on that. That's still my comfort dish. That's still my favorite dish. And it's very simple beans, affordable, and it's like, yeah, especially now that I live in Chicago in the winter days, like that's like my go-to dish, my favorite dish. And it's very basic, very boring, but to me, it has a lot of sentimental value.
That is not basic nor boring.
Absolutely not. It takes hours to make
Right.
that.
Right. Like I'm in the city right now in New York and I'm like, ooh, let me see where I can find some of that real quick too for me. No, I appreciate that answer. Never basic, never boring. Steph, same question. Favorite dish, cuisine?
Well, for me, anything that comes with plátanos. I'm from Ecuador, so bananas and plantains, that's a big thing. So, I mean, you can have them smashed, you can have them as mofongo, you can have them as, fried, campeches, you can have all these things with plantains. Leave me on an island and I will survive. Just a frying pan and some plantains.
As a Dominican, you're speaking to my heart.
That sounds so good.
Oh,
My wife's Puerto Rican, and oh my God, it's also essential to the cuisine. So love.
yep. The Caribbean, right? Oh,
Yeah.
patacones con queso. Daniela, yo, y'all speaking to my heart right now. I'm so excited to eat, and I have to find a place. No, but in all seriousness, thank you all so much, Steph and Antonio. You guys were just so amazing in this conversation. I really, really hope we can have even like a part two in the future, just to like dive into more questions and answers and conversations that I think are really important to have. So we'll definitely be in touch. But thank you everyone to tuning in. And again, shout out to Steph and Antonio for partaking today. And we will see you guys soon. Make sure you head on to the next sessions. I have no idea what they are. I have to look at the schedule. But I'll shoot out an announcement in another minute. So thank you all. I appreciate you both joining.
Thank y'all.
We'll talk soon.
Thank you.